Hi, Phil Plait from badastronomy.com here once again. Welcome to Q and BA, where I answer your questions about astronomy. This week's question comes from Terry Boodalady, and she asks, what is the rationale behind the naming and labeling of astronomical objects? I have shelves full of astronomy books and magazines, and close to 1,000 sites and papers in my bookmarks, and not a single one, explains the logic behind these labels. It's a nightmare for an amateur to learn. It's as if the International Astronomical Union gets together behind closed doors and laughs at us. Well, Terry, I don't think anybody's laughing at you. In fact, this is a pain in the butt for professionals as well. All these different catalog names makes it very difficult for us to look up objects in papers because people call them different things. Probably the most famous catalog, at least among amateurs, is the Messier catalog. Some people pronounce it Messier because it's French and it's spelled Messier, but it's Charles Messier. And he was a comet hunter in the late 1700s. And when you look at comets through a small telescope, they're like little fuzzy balls. And the problem is, Messier kept finding little fuzzy balls all over the sky that weren't comets, and this annoyed him, and so he made a catalog of these objects so that he could avoid them. And the first one he found he called M1, and the second one was M2, and he found about 100, and so there are quite a few of these objects. And what's funny is that, in fact, these are some of the most interesting objects in the sky. These are the biggest, brightest galaxies and clusters of stars and nebulae, and so it makes them a favorite target for amateur astronomers now. So the irony, of course, is that he wanted to avoid them, but in fact, it's the thing that people actually go out of their way to find now. For example, the first object, M1, is the Crab Nebula, and that's a very bright nebula, very easy to see. Well, about 100 years later, telescopes were better, we were finding more objects, and there were thousands of these little fuzzy things in the sky. We needed a better catalog. So the Royal Astronomical Society created a new catalog called the New General Catalog, or NGC, and they basically renumbered everything. There were about 8,000 objects in this catalog, and they actually had to make two more catalogs later, the index catalogs, which had 5,000 more objects in them. Well, for example, M1, the Crab Nebula, became NGC 1952, and there are all these different names, and so you can see that as we started doing different things, objects started getting new names. Well, it gets worse, actually, because even stars have lots of names. Here's a Hubble image of a very bright star. In fact, it's the brightest star in the sky. It's the brightest star, at least in the nighttime sky. The brightest star in the sky is the sun, duh. But the brightest star in the nighttime sky is this one, and it's called Sirius. You've probably heard of it. But it's also the brightest star in the constellation of Canis Major, and so it has another name, Alpha Canis Majoris. But there's another catalog which numbers the stars, and in that catalog it's called 9 Canis Majoris, or 9 CMA. Well, then there's the German Bonner Durchmusterung catalog, and so that one calls it BD minus 161591. Well, Henry Draper made a catalog where he named 250,000 stars, starting at the star that had the most eastern, sort of like longitude on the sky. It's called right ascension, but you can think of it as like longitude on the sky. And he named stars in order from east to west, and Sirius became HD 48915. But then there's also the HR catalog where it's HR 2491. Well, we launched a satellite in the 1980s which looked at infrared, and Sirius was detected, and so it got the catalog number of IRAS, the Infrared Astronomical Satellite, 06429-1639. Well, then there's the Hipparcos catalog, a European satellite that looked at distances of stars, and it became HIP 32349. But then there's the Hipparcos input catalog, which was the catalog that went into the catalog that made the Hipparcos catalog, and then it became Hipparcos input catalog number 32349. The United States Naval Observatory, it's USNO 816. The PPM 217626, I don't even know what that is. In X-rays, this is RxJO 645.1-1642, and if you don't like that one, if it displeases you for some reason, there's one RxS JO64509.3-164241, and then come on, slow down here. It's a Gen Pound plus I don't even know what that means, and then there's 8PC A3. I've never even heard of that catalog. Well, and with all of these names, you know what most people call it? They call it the Dog Star because it's in the constellation of the Big Dog. So there you have it. There are just all these different names for all these different objects, and it's because as telescopes got better and different people took these catalogs, they just used different names. And so, if you're an X-ray astronomer and you have an X-ray catalog, you're going to use that name. If you're an infrared astronomer, you're going to use the infrared catalog. And if you're an amateur astronomer, you're going to call something M1 or NGC 1952 or just, the Crab Nebula. But this is all very confusing. It's not going to get any better because we just have all these names and that's the way things are. But you know what? Don't don't let it stop you from going out and observing the night sky. These objects are beautiful. It doesn't matter what you call them. If you call it Sirius or the Dog Star or Hipparcos, whatever the number was, it's still pretty. You know, a rose by any other name will still look as sweet or smell as sweet or something like that. I don't even know if there is a rose nebula. There should be if there isn't. But look, just go out and enjoy the night sky, okay? If you have any questions for me, email me. The address is thebatastronomer@gmail.com. Send them in. I love getting your questions. So, for Q and BA, I'm Phil Plait.